Let's start sewing up all parts. First, sew the horn onto the unicorn's head between round 10 and round 11. Let's locate the position first. Count from front to back. This is round 1. Round 10. This is round 11. Place a stitch marker here. Count from both sides of the eyes toward the center. Find the middle position. Mark this spot with a stitch marker. Let's start sewing. Use a thicker sewing needle. Thread the yarn tail through the needle. Sew roughly at the spot first. The approximate position of the horn is set. Now check if the horn are centered. If the position feels off, feel free to adjust it. Then, sew the horn by matching each stitch 1 to 1. Weave the yarn tail back and forth inside the fabric several times to secure it. Cut off any excess yarn. The unicorn's horn is now sewn on. Next, sew on the ears. Sew the ears between round 10 and round 11 of the head. Leave 1 stitch space between the ears and the horn. Let's first confirm the position. Round 1. Round 10 we will sew between round 10 and round 11. Leave 1 stitch space between the ear and the horn. Use a stitch marker to mark the sewing position. The other side is the same. Leave 1 stitch space between the ear and the horn. Next, let's sew it together. First, we will use the 2 yarn tails of the inner ear. Thread the yarn tail of the inner ear onto the sewing needle. Insert the needle where the stitch marker is attached. Sew across for stitches. Remove the stitch marker. Thread the yarn tail on this side onto the sewing needle as well. Sew across for stitches. Then pass the needle through the inner ear part. Pull the yarn tail out from the same spot. The inner ear is now sewn. Next, let's sew on the outer ear. Thread the yarn tail of the outer ear onto your sewing needle. Do the same with the other yarn tail and pull the yarn tails from the same spot. This side of the ear is now sewn. Sew the other side the same way. This is how it looks after sewing both ears. Be careful not to cut the yarn tail while sewing. Once you're sure both ears are symmetrical, then trim the extra yarn tail. Pull the yarn tail out from the same spot. Then tie a knot. Trim off the extra yarn tail. Tuck the yarn end inside the fabric. Handle the other yarn tails the same way. Next, let's make the eyelashes. Take about 10 inches of black yarn. Pull out 2 strands from it. There are 4 strands in total. Pull them out one by one like this. You can set the remaining 2 strands aside. Thread the yarn onto the sewing needle. Twist the yarn like this. Make sure to use a thinner sewing needle here. This one is thicker. This one is thinner. We'll use the thinner one. One end of the yarn is long, and the other is short. Hold the head upside down like this during sewing. Insert the needle behind the eye. If you insert the needle straight like this, it might not go in. Insert the needle flattened at a slant like this. Then pull it out from any side. Pull out a bit of the yarn tail. Separate these two strands to sew. One strand should go diagonally upward. One strand should go backward. The finished eyelash looks like this. Thread one strand onto a thinner sewing needle. First, sew one stitch diagonally upward. Insert the needle at a spot diagonally above the back stitch. Pull the needle out from any spot. Thread this yarn tail onto the sewing needle as well. Then sew backward. Sew at a slight diagonal angle. Sew backward again. Pull the needle out from any spot. And just like that, one eyelash is done. You can tidy it up a bit. Pull the yarn tail out from the same spot. Tie the two yarn tails together to secure them. Cut off any excess yarn. Tuck the yarn end inside the fabric. Pass the yarn tail through the fabric several more times. Cut off any excess yarn. Use the same method to embroider the eyelash on the other side. The eyelashes on both sides are completed. Next, take out 2 strands of black yarn, each about 10 inches long. Now, let's embroider the nostrils. First, thread the yarn tail onto the sewing needle. Use the thinner needle. We'll sew between round 2 and round 3. Let's find the exact spot first. Round 1, round 2, round 3. Attach stitch markers. It's roughly around these 2 spots. Let's start sewing. Insert the needle anywhere you like. Come out just next to the stitch marker. Leave a little yarn tail outside. Don't pull it completely inside the fabric. Then sew a French knot stitch here. Hold the needle and the head together firmly. Hold the yarn with one hand. Wrap it around the needle twice. Next, hold the spot with your hand and gently pull the needle out. And just like that, you've made a French knot stitch. Then insert the needle a little bit beside it. Pull the needle out from any spot you like. Take off the stitch marker. This finishes embroidering one nostril. The other nostril is done the same way. Insert the needle just a little beside the stitch marker. Pinch the needle and the head together. Wrap the yarn around the needle twice. Press this spot with your hand. Pull the needle out. Insert the needle just a little beside. Both nostrils are now embroidered. Pull the yarn tail out from the same spot. Then tie a knot. Trim the extra yarn. Tuck the yarn end inside the fabric. Insert the sewing needle from the side. Tuck the yarn end inside the fabric. The nostrils are all done. Next, let's sew the head and body together. The body is sewn between round 11 and round 12, just below the head. First, let's find the right spot to sew. This is round 1. This is round 12. The sewing spot is right here. Mark the positions with stitch markers. Make sure to leave 6 stitches in the middle. Here's the marked spot viewed from the right side. It looks a bit crooked. Let's shift it over by half a stitch. Thread yarn tail of the body onto the sewing needle. Now, use the thicker sewing needle. Make sure the slanted side of the body is facing up. Place the flyer side down and the curved side facing up. Sew the head and body together like this. Insert the needle at the stitch marker. Pull the needle out at the other stitch marker. First, secure the positions on both sides, then sew the middle part. After sewing this part, gently press the head backward like this. Then sew the back of the head to the body. Now the head and body are sewn together. Weave the yarn tail through the fabric a few more times. Then, trim off the extra yarn. Next, let's sew the forelimbs. We'll start with the front legs. Take out one limb. Pinch the last round flat. Thread the yarn tail onto the sewing needle. Now, let's figure out where to sew. The front legs are sewn onto the body between rounds 14 and 15, counting from back to front. Let's double check. Round 1. Round 15. Sew along these two rounds. The round side facing forward should be sewn like this. If you want the front legs to sit a bit more snugly, you can add a stitch on the previous round right here. This will help it stick closer to the body. Pass the yarn tail through the fabrics several times. Finally, trim off the excess yarn tail. And just like that, one front leg is sewn on. Sew the front leg on the other side the same way. Both front legs are sewn. Now, let's sew the back legs. The back legs are sewn onto the body between round 5 and round 6. Count from back to front. This is round 1. Round 6 is located right here. Use a stitch marker to mark in place. Here are rounds 5 and 6. Next, take out the back leg. Thread the yarn tail onto the sewing needle. Pinch the last round flat. Let's start sewing. Make sure this round part is facing backward. To help it fit better, we sew one more stitch here at the back. Leave the yarn tail through the fabric a few more times. Finally, trim off the excess yarn tail. The sewing method for the other back leg is the same. Please sew it yourself using the same method. The back legs are sewn. Next, let's sew the tail. The tail is sewn onto the body at the 5th round, counting from back to front. Then, the middle of the back. This is round 1. The 5th round should be at this spot. Attach a stitch marker here to mark it. Make sure to watch the distance between the tail and the back legs. Thread the yarn tail onto the sewing needle. Insert the needle just next to the stitch marker. Pull the needle out from any spot. Thread the other yarn tail of the tail onto the sewing needle as well. Insert the needle into the round behind it here. Both yarn tails come out from the same spot. The tail is sewn on. Tie a knot to secure the yarn tail. Pass the yarn tail through the fabric several more times. Then trim off the extra yarn. Do the same with the other yarn tail. Tuck the yarn end inside the fabric. Next, let's make the unicorn's mane. First, get these 5 colors of yarn ready. You'll need 6 strands of each color, about 5 inches long. Now, locate the position. The mane goes between the 2 ears, just behind the ears. Mark the spots with stitch markers. Sew the mane between these 2 stitch markers. Use a piece of white or pink yarn about 15 inches long as your sewing yarn. Sew the mane of the white unicorn using white yarn. Use pink yarn for the mane of the pink unicorn. Thread the yarn onto the sewing needle. Use the yarn with one end long and the other short like this. Insert the needle at the stitch marker. Pull the needle out through the next stitch. Don't pull the yarn tail completely inside the fabric. Leave a bit of length outside. Then take a yellow yarn. Fold the yarn in half. Thread the sewing needle through the middle. You need to pierce through the yellow yarn. Place it behind the sewing yarn. Then take a pink yarn. When picking yarn, stagger the colors. Fold the yarn in half. Thread it through the middle. Pick out the blue yarn. Fold it in half and thread it through the middle. This way, 3 strands form one group. Place it underneath the sewing yarn, right near the stitch. Pass the sewing needle back through the stitch where the stitch marker is attached. Then go through the next stitch. Wrap around this group of yarns one more time. Pull out through the next stitch. Just like that, these 3 yarns are sewn together. Now you can take off the stitch marker. Next, thread 3 yarns onto the sewing needle. Make sure to stagger the colors. Take out the rosary yarn. Fold the yarn in half, then thread it through the middle. Take a piece of white yarn. Fold it in half, then pass it through the middle. Next, take a piece of yellow yarn. Fold it in half and pass it through the middle. Place all the yarns at the base of the sewing yarn. Tie up the yarns. Then pass the sewing needle back through the previous stitch. Pass it back through the stitch where the yarn was just placed. Sew once around this group of yarns. This way, these 3 strands of yarn are secured. Next, continue threading 3 strands of yarn onto the sewing needle. Be sure to alternate the colors. Tidy up the yarns. The sewing method are the same. Let's get started sewing. This group of yarns is sewn. Now, continue threading yarns onto the sewing needle. Sew the remaining yarns the same way. This round is sewn. Then thread the needle to the next round. Tidy up the yarns. Flip the mane up. Reveal the next round for sewing the mane. Keep threading the yarns onto the sewing needle. Then sew the rest of the yarns the same way. All the yarns are sewn. Thread the yarn tail inside the fabric. Then pull it out from any spot. Remove the sewing needle. The mane is completed. Unneaten the mane. Comb it backward like this. You can't rim any longer yarn strands. You can also trim the mane to your favorite length. One unicorn is finished.